Good morning, boys and girls. Happy Friday. It's the day before April vacation. I just posted on Google Classroom that we are still having April vacation next week. So there'll be no new work, but it's a good chance to kind of go through Google Classroom, get caught up on some lessons that you may have fallen behind on. You have a whole week to do that. So you can do that if you need, not all of you need to, and then other than that, you're free to play, relax, and just enjoy your time, and it should be a nice week weather-wise. We will pray for that. So today we are kicking off lesson 9.6. Can you believe it? We're doing so well. We're doing a lesson a day, which is a really tough goal. However, it's working out for us, which is great. If we continue at this pace, we're not going to miss anything this year, which is great. So today we are modeling equivalent fractions. We have spoken about equivalent fractions. Again, equivalent, you can actually just see the word equal in it, right? Now, we had the Khan Academy video a couple weeks back about equivalent fractions, and now lesson 9.6 is all about them. So that's why I did that, so you kind of have some background knowledge of it. Let's dive right on in. Two or more fractions that name the same amount are called equivalent fractions. You can use a sheet of paper to model fractions equivalent to 1/2. So first, fold a piece of paper into 2 equal parts. Open the paper and count the parts. So kind of did that right over here. I just folded it. I have 2 equal parts. And each part is 1/2 of the paper, right? And they have a diagram here too. Now shade one of the halves and write 1/2 on each of the halves. So if you wanted to do that, you could. It's also shown here. Next, fold the paper in half 2 times and open the paper. Now there would be 4 equal parts, and each part is 1/4 of the paper. So if I was to do that, okay, we have 4 equal parts, right? And if you were to shade one of these, it would be 1/4. Look at the shaded parts. 1/2 equals, and we have this box here. So 1/2, if I was to shade a whole half of this paper, okay, and before I folded it into 4 pieces, 1/2 would be the same thing as 2/4, right? 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. Last, fold the paper in half 3 times. And then there would be 8 equal parts, and each part is 1/8 of the paper, right? Remember unit fractions? It's when you have 1 as the numerator, 1 piece of the whole. And then again, write 1/8 on each of the eighths. So find the fractions equivalent to 1/2 on your paper. After folding that, we learned that 1/2 is also equal to 2/4 and 4/8. Okay. All right. Now I wrote some of this already. It says, explain how many 1/8 parts are equivalent to 1/1/4 part on your paper. Pretty wordy. However, there are 2 1/8 parts in 1/1/4 part. So here you have the fraction 1/4, and I remember telling you that if you multiply the bottom and the top by the same number, you can get an equivalent fraction. So I did 2. And I got 2/8. So there are 2 1/8 parts and 1/1/4 part. What do you notice about how the numerators changed for the shaded part as you folded the paper? Well, as we continued to fold, the numerators got larger, right? Look what happened here. The 1 became a 2. And what does this tell you about the change in the number of parts? The number of parts increased. How did the denominators change for the shaded part as you folded? They doubled. Oops. Look at that. 4 doubled into 8. And what does this tell you about the change in the size of the parts? The size of the parts, which is your denominator, got smaller, right? So now each of those squares, like when we had this, originally we had 1/2. It was huge, right? Each part was this big. We folded it and now each part is this big. Okay, so every time we fold it, it's going to get smaller, the pieces. And those pieces represent your denominator. Okay, now we can also represent equivalent fractions using a number line. Okay, we are modeling a fraction that's equivalent to 2/3. So step 1 says to draw a point on the number line to represent the distance 2/3. So I did that right here. And then it says use fraction strips to divide the number line into sixths. At the end of each strip, draw a mark on the number line and label the marks to show 6. So that's what I did up here. It did this one for us, 0/6. Then it gave me this right here, which would be 1/6. 2/6, which is exactly above 1/3, and we'll talk about why. Hint, hint, they're equivalent. 3/6, 4/6, 5/6, and 6/6. We stop there because 6 out of 6, that's 1 whole, just like 3/3. So look at these two. These are both 1 whole. Okay. So step 3 says identify the fraction that names the same point as 2/3. So I go to 2/3 right here, and above it is 4/6. So 2/3 is the same thing as 4/6. They're equivalent. And look at this little trick I taught you a while ago. Multiply the bottom and the top by the same number. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 2 is 4. I could do it again. And there you go. That's also equivalent. Okay, moving on. So now what we're going to do is we are going to shade the model and then divide the pieces to find the equivalent fraction. So we're doing this together, no stressing, everything is okay. So we have 1/4 here. Now if I was to shade 1/4, I would just do this. Now it's giving us an equivalent fraction over here, and all we know is that 8 is the denominator. And remember, that is telling you the number of pieces. So I have 4. If I do this, I have 8, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now looking at this model, out of 8, 2 are shaded. So 1/4 is equivalent to 2/8. And right there, you kind of showed the process of that. That's an example of what we did on the first page with the paper, but drawn out. All right, number 2. So first, we have the fraction 2/3. Let's model that. So I have, again, the denominator is your total number of pieces, 1, 2, 3. I want to shade in 2. 1, 2. Okay. Now it wants to show me an equivalent fraction, and all I know is the denominator. Again, that's telling you your total number of pieces. All I know is there's 6. So I'm just going to draw a line down here, and now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So out of 6, how many are shaded? 1, 2, 3, 4. So 2/3 is equivalent to 4/6. And again, that little trick, 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 2 is 4. When my teacher told me that, yep, there's my coffee. When my teacher told me that, and honestly, I learned this, boys and girls, and this is something for you to be very proud of. I learned equivalent fractions and most of my fraction lessons in 5th grade. You're learning them in 3rd grade. That's how times have changed from just the curriculum in general. A lot of things that I learned or your parents learned, you're learning them before we did in school. So you should be very, very proud of yourselves. This is not easy stuff, and I believe I told you in class, fractions was the hardest thing for me growing up. That was the hardest lesson within math, was fractions for me. So it just takes a lot of practice. It really helps if you're a visual learner. There's a lot of different types of learners. Some love listening and writing, some love hands-on activities, and some love visual diagram type stuff. So fractions and geometry kind of falls under that visual learning. All right, now we're going to do the same thing but using a number line. So here we have the fraction 1/2. Let's find that on the number line. And I like this one because you just need to look above it. 3/6 is the same. Okay, and again, 2 times, oh goodness, just kidding. You have to ask yourself the question, how do I get from 2 to 6? So by 3. Again, you can multiply the bottom and the top by any number you want, as long as they're the same. Okay, this one. So 3/4 is right here. And right above it is 6/8. So ask yourself, from 4 to 8, okay, I have to multiply by 2, do it to the top. Yep, it works. So those are equivalent. You want to be able to spell that word and use that word, right? Because that's our academic language. Feel comfortable using, instead of saying it's equal or it's the same as, you could say 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. Sound nice and fancy. All right. Number 5, again, I went ahead today and I drew these because I'm noticing in my videos from the past, my drawings are they're hideous. So I wanted to draw before so it looked a little bit more organized, but I'll still go over it. Okay, explain why 2/2 is equal to 1. And then write another fraction that is equal to 1. Draw to justify your answer. Make sure you are reading the entire instructions on the quiz. A couple questions asked you to draw, and some people didn't do that part. So you really want to read the whole thing through. Now, just going back, 2 is the numerator, 2 is the